Got push up left.
Yeah, roger.
Ever watched Battle Los Angeles and you're a member of the Marine Corps, the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and it made you feel oddly patriotic, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Guys, like and comment. Comment section is always out of control. They will likely shut me down at some point, but for now, keep being your crazy, crazy selves. Today, we're going to be talking about a real treat. That is the MEUSOC 1911 A1. This is a legendary 1911 build that has served the Marine Corps from grunt all the way up to Special Operations Forces for a long time. Now, there is a very storied history behind this, and I want to talk about that for a quick minute before we get into the video. I spent a good amount of my life in the military, specifically within Air Force Special Warfare, first as a SEER guy, then as a TAC-P. In all my times working with the Marine Corps, I've always been impressed with both the professionalism, the rowdiness, and the utter desire to kill. So when you talk about the MEUSOC, the thing you have to understand about it is that these were built by specially trained Marines for Marines. And in talking to the actual men who built these, there's a lot of pride because they knew that their very own fellow Marines, their brothers, would be going down range with these and would rely on these possibly to protect their lives. The thing that they've often told me is if they had to build a gun and that gun were to go before God and they would be judged on that one firearm, is it good enough for him? They took a lot of pride in their work, and I have always been very impressed with the Marine Corps, and this firearm and the men who built it and used it have always impressed me. So let's get into this video today, but before we get into it, of course, I have to thank the biggest sponsor of the channel. The biggest sponsor of the channel is Primary Arms. If you're looking to buy great optics at a great price, or even their brand new US made optic, the HTX-1, which is a pistol optic, which actually sits low enough to co-witness with iron sights. Go and check them out. We love them so much. And of course, go check out Henry Repeating Arms. Now, the best part about Henry Repeating Arms is that, man, they have a rifle selection for everything you could possibly want, and their motto strikes a resonant chord with me: made in America or not made at all. Their build quality is excellent, and there's cool catalogs you can check out. But here's the thing, guys, go and check out henrythumb.com for some really exciting opportunities. I can't say anything more about that. Of course, if you're looking to get better at shooting, dry fire is the way to go. Mantis will turn your gun into a dry fire machine, and we recommend dry fire. And finally, all ammunition is provided for by AAC. Let's get into it. So, when it comes to the MEUSOC, if you're unfamiliar with it, the MEUSOC is a heavily modified, first USGI, then nearly all custom-built 1911 A1. Feeds from either a 7, 8, or 10-round magazine, firing 45 ACP, which, as we know, if you are shooting a 45, the only reason you're shooting is because you can't shoot a 46. So it's just a very well-built gun. And the thing you have to say about the MEUSOC is that they call it a near match grade or a combat match grade weapon. Now what that means is that match grade is a term that you hear quite a bit for particularly accurized weapon systems for various competitions. Now in doing so, you typically render the weapon a little bit less reliable due to tolerances and how tight the gun begins to get. So this gun rides the line behind being a really tight lockup for exceptional accuracy and being loose enough to function well in combat, because these pistols had to be not just accurate, but they had to be dummy reliable. So we're going to talk about that. But before we get into it, let's go out to the range with a younger, more possibly handsome version, which is hard to believe, version of myself, as we do our on the range portion from the shooter's perspective. We are now here on the range, and we're going to be performing some drills with the legendary MEUSOC 1911. This is mine right here. John, go ahead and draw yours out. John has a slightly different model. This is an older generation MEUSOC, but also built by Valor Precision and just an absolute tank, obviously without the MR07 light attachment. But for all intents and purposes, they are the same gun with the exception of more weight out front, which means it's easier to control, right, John?
Way easier.
Yeah, but I gotta hold it out, man.
I'm stronger.
Yeah. So we're gonna run a couple drills. We're gonna test out how good the MEUSOC is. All right, first drill is going to be build drill. 6 rounds at 7 yards. Sub 2.5 is good. Sub 2 is considered really good for the Modern Samurai project. That's like the black belt standard. So if we get sub 2, we'll feel pretty good. If I'm hovering around there with a 45, I'm gonna feel great. We are firing full power 230 grain ball from AAC. So let's get into it.
Stand by. Oh, 2 Charlies, 194. What was the time? 194. Okay, give you one more.
Yeah.
Stand by. 204. John, you want to try it?
Yep. Shooter ready.
Yep. Stand by. 230. Nice. Speedy. Look at the beak time.
If I went low 2s, then I'd probably start getting like 2 or 3 Charlie, you know?
No, that's good. That's really good. All right, let's hit some Mozambique. Mozambique's giving me 2 to the chest, 1 to the head.
You only need 1. Because it's a 45.
It's a 45. You'll need 1 round, sonny. 2 to the chest, 1 to the head.
All right, 2 ready. Yeah. Stand by. 136.
Okay.
Not bad. A lot better. 145.
Okay, 1 more.
His teeth are like a football field away.
145.
Okay. We get it. Stand by. Really good. 136. Clean. 176. Thanks, man.
Good. Now, Jeremy Stone. Shit. Do you know why we call it the Mozambique drill?
Something to do with Africa and Rhodesian camo.
Jeremy's obsessed with Africa for whatever
I
reason.
want to hunt poachers, dude. I don't know what to tell you.
You know whose time it is. Now, Jeremy has fired 1 round on the 45 1911, but that's life, right, dude?
Yeah.
You never know what you're gonna need.
No, you guys get 3 or 4 redos. I'll do it once. So yeah,
That's clean.
Yep.
Okay, shooter, are you ready?
Yep.
Stand by.
nice. 1 round.
That's all you need. That's all you need. Stand by. Oh, you want his or you want mine? Okay, you want mine.
All right, dude.
Okay, shooter, you ain't send the course fire.
Yep.
Stand by. That was good. 109. Let's go. From retention, that's still really good.
Well, yeah. I can pretend it's in my pocket.
Yeah. Okay, ready? Stand by. 127. Let's go, Jeremy Stone.
I like 45.
This is why we hired him.
It isn't.
So we're gonna be shooting at 75 yards right here. Maybe a little bit more, to be honest, but who's counting? So a lot of people say that the 1911 isn't a particularly accurate weapon, but I think that's mostly the problem with the shooter. John, can you make shots this far with the 1911?
With a Glock with a dot, very easily, but...
All right, go ahead, drop. Fire.
There we go.
There we go.
First round.
First round.
All right, let's see what you got. There you go.
There we go. Leave on a high note.
It's doable.
So what me and John are gonna do now is we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna do an A-zone drill at 35 yards. This is practicing our ability to control the weapon, and we're trying to get sub 4 seconds, I believe is what we went for.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, so let's go ahead and let's get that set up.
All right, so we're at about 35, maybe a little bit more, 35 meters. And it's just a simple 4 rounds in under 4 seconds, preferably all inside the A zone.
Preferably inside the A zone.
So it's a little bit of recoil control, but mainly just going for accuracy, focusing on like trigger squeeze, stuff like that.
Okay, here we go, buddy.
So there's gonna be 4 rounds in under 4 seconds. It's gonna be like really focusing on trigger control, side alignment, all that good stuff.
If everything goes to plan.
If everything goes to plan. All right, 4 rounds.
Yeah.
Shooter ready, stand by. Looks like 1 Alpha, maybe 2 Charlies and a Delta, and 438.
All right, let's see if I can get sub 3. So you got 3 Charlie, 1 Alpha.
Yep.
Let's give it another shot.
4 rounds. Shooter ready. Stand by. Hits look good. 405.
Okay, so it's Alpha. Oh, look at that stack. Nice, all Alpha. 405. Cool. All right, buddy. Let's do it. Get us on the course fire.
Yep. Stand by.
Fast. 324. See how you did. All low again. Yeah, it looks like Delta, Charlie. Yeah, that's Charlie. So 3 Charlies, 1 Delta.
Yeah, Mike shot all these beforehand. Down at it.
There you have it. You want to run it one more time?
Sure.
You good? Okay, one more time. We're gonna give John. I did a redo, so we'll give John a redo. Shooter, are you ready?
Yep. Stand by.
Oh, that was good. 2 Alpha, Charlie, Delta. I have really good eye vision. At least I think I do. The military tells me I did like 2015. Is that good? I don't know. I'm getting old, dude.
These 2 are new, and I think it was like over here.
Yeah, it was 2, 2, 2.
I really don't like this guy's hips for some reason.
Damn. Just shoot him in the pelvis. So one thing we want to talk about while we're here is also the 1911, the grip angle, the return. I sound like such a boomer right now, but literally the 1911 does feel really good to shoot. So grip angle on the 1911 is like, I would say probably one of the most quintessential, like easy to bring to your eye, like grips. Like for me, the presentation is always good in the 1911. I do love shooting my Glock more. It's just lighter. I think the grip angle is aggressive. That allows you to really drive into the gun. However, like comfortability and like ease of presentation, the 1911 always cinches it for me. You know, with the Glock, when you first get one, it's always kind of like a bit of a struggle to get those sights right on target.
For me, it was the opposite because I've only used the Glock until now.
You're such a zoomer.
Yeah, but you're a zoomer. I can see why people really like it. So
now another great thing is a lot of people think that 45 is going to be like some crazy, like strong, loud caliber that's going to be like impossible to control. But the 1911 actually has a really good return. So when you fire the 1911, it just has a tendency to come right back on the target. That's a lot of grip and time on the gun as well. But like it really does feel really good to shoot the 1911, both due to the just the mechanism itself. It just lends itself to a return on a target, as well as the really nice trigger on the 1911s. John, go ahead and show that and talk about that.
yeah, so we've referred to it as tracking, that the 1911 tracks very well. USPSA guys in the comment section, they might get mad at us if that's the wrong term, but I'm still getting used to it, but I think it definitely returns to the point of aim better than a Glock.
We've done about 1,200 rounds per gun so far in training up for this video.
Is it 6 rounds bill drill?
Yeah, go ahead. Shoot. Yeah, you just drilled out the center. It is a very easy gun to shoot. It feels really good. Now I have to run the bill drill, dude, because that just looks so much fun. Where's my ammo? Dude, it just feels so good to shoot that guy. 1911 just feels good to shoot. I sound like such a boomer. And after shooting it for a little bit, I'm like, all you need is 1 round of 4-5, just putting down forever and aim getting back up.
It's just gonna be his boots there with like steam coming out of them.
Dude, so the first time I went to a gun shop, a gun store owner was selling a 1911, and he literally, this actually kind of makes me want to kill myself. He actually took a pair of boots put them on the counter, looked at him really seriously. He's like, it'll blow them right out of these. And I was like, terrible, dude. But with all this being said, we've shown a lot of shooting, a lot of how the gun returns, how it feels. Let's get back into the black screen. Let's talk about autistic detail on the MEUSOC 1911 with an older, more handsome version of myself. Yeah.
Okay, we are back from the range. I want to say that I am particularly proud of pulling sub 2-second build drills. That has always been a goal of mine. And the MEUSOCs just kind of made it really easy to do. So a lot of shooting at this point. Let's talk about the history and how the MEUSOC came about. Now, this video is sponsored by Barbell Apparel. We love Barbell Apparel, and you know what? Unfortunately, I'm actually wearing all their clothing right now. It kind of feels like I'm called out. But they are hosting their biggest sale once again. Buy their athletic jeans, buy their chinos, buy their joggers for only $99. Now, I got some thick thighs, dude. A lot of guys in my crew have thick thighs, but they have a little bit of stretch in them. They feel great, and we cannot recommend them enough. These are their flannels as well I'm also wearing. Their joggers feel great, and you know what? It's gonna make you significantly more attractive if you wear them. Allegedly. That's from me, not from them, so I can say that. Now, best part about it, they want you to use them. Go, get out there, slide down mountains, shoot guns. And if you rip them, if you break them, if they're done for whatever reason, lifetime guarantee, they're gonna replace them. Go check out Barbell Apparel. Very base of them to sponsor this channel. Of course, let's get back to the MEUSOC 1911. So the thing you have to understand about the MEUSOC is that the Marine Corps, they make do with what they have. The Marine Corps has always been on the short end of the stick when it comes to equipment, whether it be Marines running the M16A2 for way too long or running the M16A4 for far too long, to running the most clapped out Berettas you've ever seen in your life, to just not getting great stuff. Now that is changing a little bit. They are getting much better equipment now, but that's always been something that's impressed me. No matter what they get, they're going to kill with it and they're going to be good at it. So when the idea was put forth, so you have something called a MEU in the Marine Corps. That's a Marine Expeditionary Unit. Now, within there, you of course have many other individuals who be utilizing this 1911. The SOC stands for Special Operations Capable. So not only was it used by your MEUs, but it was also used by your Force Recon guys, famously Travis Haley, my dad, and of course further by Raiders. So these weapons have been heavily used in combat, and if I'm not mistaken, a kill occurred with one, and I believe in 2018, where a Marine fired his 45 and killed somebody at like 80 yards with it, which is always a good time, getting domed by a 45 from World War II. So there are 4, or possibly at this point, maybe 5 variations when it comes to the MEUSOC 1911. So variant 1, what you had was essentially the Marine Corps recognized that they needed a pistol that could just perform. That was accurized, it was more user-friendly. So the first variants that you saw were simply World War II surplus 1911 A1s that, of course, the government was more than happy to let the Marines have a go at weapons from 1945. And the Marines then made it into a more functional weapon with ambidextrous safeties, with better sights, with better barrels, typically using Barstow stainless steel barrels that they hand fitted to these guns. And that is something that you have to say about the MEUSOCs. All these MEUSOCs are hand fit. They are not interchangeable parts. And so that was both the good and the bad thing about them, is that each gun was particularly tuned to be the best combination of frame and slide that it could be. So now this particular weapon was built by Valor Precision. Now Nick over at Valor, not only did he build MEUSOCs for the Marine Corps as a precision weapons technician, but he also built M39s, M40s, and just made sure that these MEUSOCs were combat ready. So the great thing about this one right here, I have a variant, interim variant 3, variant 4, is that this frame and slide were actually sent to the hot balloon tanks at the MEUSOC, at the area where they build the MEUSOC guns out. So this is about getting really dang close to clone correct in terms of actually having been in that hot balloon bath. Like, that's a heirloom piece right there. And of course I've shot the living dog hell out of it. And then the other variant that we have right here was also built by Valor Precision. This is a variant 2/variant 3, depending on the way you look at it. And I do want to mention that Valor Precision being a friend of ours, I did, of course, pay for these guns. These were not given to me for free. I pay them for them with my hard-earned neat bucks. But, of course, you also have KC Customs, who also makes them. He was also a man who built tons of MEUSOCs and is a huge repository of information. I have to thank both these individuals for their input into this video, as well as the various MEUs that contributed, the various raiders, and the various Horse Recon guys who weren't able to be noted specifically by name, but we're more than happy to provide information for this particular video. So a big thank you to them. And of course, you guys know who you are. MEU donated a lot of their surplus magazines to me for this video. So you guys rock. Thank you for giving us the real deal for this video. So with all that being said, of course, we want to make sure we have a loaded mag in there, because why else would God give you a 1911? Now, without delving too hard into the history of the variant 1, we'll be primarily delving into variants 2, 3, and 4. So you can see there are some changes that were made between this variant 2/3 and the interim 3 to 4. Now, if you're very astute, you'll notice that the first thing that probably stands out are the sights. So previously, on the older generation, we did have a millet front dot, and then at the rear, we did have a Marine Corps made by the precision weapon technicians rear sight that has been reproduced for this particular build right here. So once we got to the later generation, we had a slide that was Novak cut. Now there might be a couple other confusing things for you, because if you notice on both these slides, they do say Springfield Armory. So there's a lot of confusion as to whether or not these are Springfield guns, whether they were fully built by Springfield and delivered to the Marine Corps, and that's not true. So although they do have Springfield slides that were delivered and that were ordered, these are custom built guns. So the frame, at least in Gen 3 through 4, are Caspian frames, which were then fit to Springfield slides that were ordered. Now, in the older variants, you could see that our slides do not have the front serrations. Those came about in the later generation in our variant in term 3 and 4. So these are nice, of course, because if you're going to go ahead and do a press check, so if you have our live magazine right here, load that. I love that sound it makes when it loads. And if we wanted to check to see if the round is actually seated, make sure it's good, we can pull it back just a bit, see the brass, we have gloves on, feel that brass. A lot of people say, why do you do a press check? Well, if you're going to depend on your weapon to protect your life, it doesn't really cost you anything. Just do it on base before you head out, before you LARP and head out. Do something. Just make sure your gun's loaded. And a large heart of the MEUSOCs was particularly in the barrel. For my guys who have watched the channel for a while, you know that a lot depends on a very well-manufactured barrel. And to be clear, several different barrels have been used over time with the MEUSOCs. This is due to the fact that, quite frankly, it can be hard to procure the parts necessary. So those armorers within the Marine Corps did everything they could and ordered what parts they could to make sure these guns were running when they were deployed out to the field or out to sea. Understandable. But for the most part, we're going to stick to what was typically used on base that was built and what you typically see. So when it comes to our barrels, we are looking at a Barstow barrel. If you're unfamiliar with them, they make incredibly accurate, incredibly wonderful barrels. And in addition to that, these are going to be a drop-in. Now, that is a bit of a misnomer because drop-in implies that you can put that barrel right into that slide and then it's going to function. These all had to be hand fit. And a lot of that actually does come from that. That also comes from the barrel bushing, which is also from Barstow. These parts were all mated up together to make for a very, very accurate weapon out of the gate. Now, compared to even the M9, even newer weapons, you can achieve a very high level of accuracy with a well-tuned and well-fitted barrel in a 1911. Now, these barrels are stainless. A big part of this was, of course, making sure that these barrels could stand up to hard use. The nice thing about 45 is that 45 doesn't have a particularly devastating pressure curve compared to, 9mm isn't crazy, but 45 is a fairly low pressure round. Because of that, these barrels do last a fairly long time. And that is always going to be something that they were thinking about when they were putting these pistols together. You'll see that most of the things that they have done were to ensure longevity of the parts, to ensure that they would function in any type of combat environment. Now, when we move down from the barrel, we have to talk, of course, about the recoil mechanism itself. The recoil mechanism is your typical recoil mechanism with an 18.5-pound spring. Of course, you can get different types of recoil patterns. You can make a 1911 so it almost doesn't even recoil by messing with that. However, that can heavily affect the reliability of the weapon. By sticking to an 18.5 pound recoil spring, they're able to ensure that the guns are going to return to battery, and more importantly, that over the heavy workups, the heavy amount of rounds that these operators would fire in both train-ups and in deployment situations, that these guns would not wear out. So we'll talk more about those parts that you need to swap out, and that's directly from the armorers who made these guns and their typical schedules that they go with. But the thing that you have to note from the Marine armorers who worked on these is that there were extensive checklists that they would go through, that they would check off to kind of put their little magic secret sauce into these guns. So while many people can make a MEUSOC clone, very few people can put that secret sauce in it, which is why I typically recommend, if you're going to buy a MEUSOC clone, that you go with one of the MEUSOC armors former, who's now making them in the public eye, hence KC Customs and Valor Precision. Now on this particular generation, we do have Novak sights. Now they are blacked out, both front and rear. The night sights typically weren't authorized. However, you would see them. Again, there are variations that you'd see in the field, just not what was issued, but this is generally what you see, especially when you look at photos of these guns being used. They're serrated at the back to kill any type of glare that's going to be coming off of that from the sun. And for me, I find them to be highly, highly usable. So of course, I love red dots, but that being said, you can be extremely precise, deadly, and efficient with iron sights, and I sound like a boomer, but it feels really good actually shooting this with iron sights. It just feels right. It feels like John Moses Browning would have liked this very much. Now, before we get too far, I'm sure you guys are going to ask, what is this monstrosity on the end right here? This is a Surefire MR07. It was a drop-in rail that allowed you to add a light to your weapon. Now, in the case of what we have right here, we do have an X300 Ultra. That's not really clone correct. It would actually be just your older X300s that were typically mounted, same size, so it doesn't matter too much to me. Now, how these mount is they actually use the slide stop pin to secure the mount to place, and there's a small tensioning set screw. And you don't want to tighten it too much. You don't want to tighten it so little that it flops around. It's kind of a little bit of a balancing act, but more importantly, the problems that you run into with the MR07 nowadays is that they're so worn out. This is a product that is no longer made by Surefire, even though I think it's really cool and they should bring it back. You know what, maybe we'll just bring it back with onward research. So because they're not made, you're getting some pretty well-worn examples. And in addition to that, the slide stop pin from Surefire, they're hard to find because they wear out, they break, and the ones that you do get your hands on are a little bit worn. So this particular one's a little bit worn to the point that it tends to want to walk out a little bit and cause some wonky stuff to happen. So that's the unfortunate nature of that. We are getting a brand new one that we're able to find in packaging, but it just sucks. So we'll probably end up making a reproduction because that would be super cool. So we have that light rail right there, and that is something that you'd see on operational weapons. They did try adding at various times a bolt-on Picatinny rail to the lower section of these frames. However, they found that this was typically leading to cracks as the heavy round counts were shot by the operators. And because of this, it would just render those guns inoperable. And this was done away with because they realized it was not working, unfortunately. Obviously, in the later development of the MEUSOC with the M45A1, they did have a rail, but that gun was a little bit of a disaster. Now, moving back from there, we do have in the ignition set, it's from Cylinder and Slide. So the ignition set, it says your sear, disconnector, hammer, everything that's gonna lead to the ignition of that primer on that round. Now, these are very finely tuned weapons, between 4 to 4.5, some people say 5, but these triggers are incredibly, incredibly light and easy to shoot. It's probably why I'm able to pull like a 1-1 split with a 1911, which is psychotically fast on a pistol. So one thing that I definitely want to do is let's go ahead, let's ghost this trigger together. Let's feel what that is like. Now, they've often said these triggers should feel like a glass rod breaking. It should be nice and little thin glass rod. Just let's see what it feels like. So pressing into it, we have a little bit of play right there. I prefer a 2-stage. Once we hit that, we have our let off just a smidge over. You can see that little slide stop pin walking out. Smidge over 4 pounds, barely. That is a very, very easy weapon to shoot. Now, in addition to that, let's check the reset right there. So off the reset, it's barely any. So it's very easy to shoot this gun very quickly. And with the 18.5 pound recoil spring, with the weight of the weapon, the 1911, and especially the MEUSOC, have a definite kind of tendency after they shoot to settle right back onto target. Some people call this tracking. I found that with the 1911, I can shoot them significantly faster than many other handguns that I have. Now, it comes down to training. There's trained Glock shooters out there that will absolutely destroy me. I'm not the best shooter in the world. I'm not even close to it. But I have to say that at 1911, shooting it always feels really good. The 45 is a gentle push. 9mm is a little bit more snappy, but overall less. But the 45 is very, very easy to control overall. And in shooting this quite a bit the last couple weeks in preparation for this video, I've been very impressed. Now, people will ask round count on this. We're at about 7,000 rounds on this particular weapon. I have sent it back to Valor for a workup once in preparation for this video, just because I wanted to make sure it's tuned up. That would be something that you'd see from the operators out in the field, and having the armors take a look at their gun to make sure, inspect everything, and make sure they're up to snuff. I am firing very hotly loaded 45. To test the limits of the pistol. So because of that, there's a lot of stress and wear occurring on the pistol. It should also be noted that many of these MEUSOCs did come with the shock buffers, little blue things that you put on the guide rod. The problem with this is that they will disintegrate over time between 500 to 1,000 rounds, and then little bits will get into your weapon and kind of make it inoperable. So I haven't been a huge fan of them. I know they increase the longevity of the weapon system. It's just not my favorite thing to do, so I typically don't run those in my 1911s. Now, moving back from there, we of course have our typical Springfield slide. There's a lot of talk of where would the Springfield crest be, and due to the amount of variants that you saw on the MEUSOCs, you saw a lot of variants of the Springfield Armory slides that were delivered to the Marine Corps. Some of them marked operators, some of them with different positioning, but generally what you saw was the classic Model 1911-A1, blow it, caliber 45. So I think that is a very simple but brutal method of identifying the weapon, and I kind of love that. Now, moving back from the trigger is a Videki 3-hole speed trigger, and they are phenomenal. Now, going down to the magazine release, typical magazine release, can't say enough good things. Slightly extended. We do have Pachmayr grips, which are wraparound rubber grips. I'm a huge fan of Pachmayr grips. I just love the way they feel. We do have a straight mainspring housing compared to an arched mainspring housing. That is something to talk about. So in the later models, we did have the Ed Brown beaver tail safety right here. Obviously, I do have a little Ranger band around this to press it down. I've never really liked the grip safety on 1911s. I've always had a tendency to do this. People say get a good grip. You don't always get a good grip on your gun, depending on the situation. This was not allowed within the Marine Corps as far as taping that down. I'm sure guys did it anyhow, but just as a quick note there. Now, King safeties were typically used on these guns. There are some variations thereof. Mine is just single because I didn't like the way it felt when I was shooting it a lot. With being on that side, kind of a little bit of a fat hands right there. It's kind of embarrassing. But that is what you're dealing with there. And then, of course, we get to the magazine. So I do want to talk about these because a lot of people have questions about what was used. So we do have Wilson Combat 7-round magazines that are your typical magazines that were used. These ones are directly from MEU, who used MEUSOC 1911s. So a big thank you to them again. They hold 7 rounds. And then obviously there are magazines that have larger capacity. This is right here, a Wilson Combat 8-round magazine. And of course, there are also Wilson Combat 10 rounds, and there are many other manufacturers. In general, I've typically been told to use Wilson Combat 1911 magazines. Those are the ones I typically stick with. I have used the chip power mags. Those also have worked really well in my MEUSOCs. But the ACT mags have always been problematic for me, as have the mech GARs. Your experiences may vary. Just understand that the 1911 world's a little bit interesting, and I'm sure you'll get a million different opinions when you talk about magazines or any number of different parts that you can put into your 1911. Now, obviously, we do have numbers here on a gun. We have just 9 basic rack numbers that you'd see on MEUSOC to really complete that look. For me, I have too many guns, so I do number them as far as tracking rounds. You should track rounds on your 1911 as well. We'll talk about that in just a moment here. The last note I do want to make on the Barstow barrels is that they were typically also blued to give it that nice black look all around. Mine is very, very worn. But if we go to my newer MEUSOC variant that I have right here, just clean off a little bit of oil, make it look pretty for you guys, we do still have that coating on there. So that is a quick note. These older ones were Parkerized. You did have hot bluing that was later done, which is what we have on this later model right here. And I have beautiful patina on this one because I've been shooting it the most. As a quick note, I do want to talk about this one for a moment. This one I had him make just to be a ridiculously good shooter. So there is a little bit of parts variability compared to a typical MEUSOC in here. Mostly in fact that being a variant 2 or 3, the Caspian frame isn't exactly perfect, but we wanted a really tight fitting gun because I just wanted to be able to run this in competition or, with the boys and just have a good time. So that as a quick note there, this thing runs crazy. He can make you a very, very good 1911. Now, we've kind of getting here to the end. So obviously the MEUSOC 1911 isn't used anymore. As of 2022, it is now an obsolete weapon system. And again, it's been showing its age for a while. The magazine capacity, the older rounds that were used, this makes it tough, not to mention the amount of maintenance that had to be done on these particular weapons. So let's talk about that maintenance cycle and what it looked like. These are preventative measures. Obviously, these springs that I'm talking about can go far longer. However, to make sure that these were always combat ready, they did change out springs before any types of problems present themselves. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna talk about the springs and what you need replaced. So when it comes to the recoil spring, between 3 to 5K rounds. Now, that is of course very conservative. I do that on my particular guns just to ensure that they're always in tip-top shape. The firing pin spring should be changed at the same time between 3 to 5K rounds. I typically change both of those at the same exact time. Those shock buffs between 500 to 1,000 if you do have them in your gun, although with higher pressure ammunition like I was using, I found that changing them at about 300 is necessary, which is why I stopped using them. It was just ended up just being a little too much of a maintenance cycle for me. Of course, main spring, hammer spring between 10,000 to 15,000 rounds, and finally at 25, a complete changeover of all springs. And then of course at 50K, this is like the total rebuild. Like you're stripping everything out of that gun, you're giving it a whole go around, you're checking for cracks. And again, the United States Marine Corps did use MagnaFlux in order to check for cracks on their frames. It's basically a die with magnets and it shows it in the cracks and stuff. And unfortunately, those older USGI frames would crack fairly regularly, so that was a good thing to do. A little bit tougher for you guys to do this, but inspect it for any types of wear, cracks, anything that's abnormal, replace parts as necessary, and it's going to stay in working order. You have any problems with it? You know what, Valor Precision, he's gonna take care of you, or KC Custom, both great guys, so just understand that. The 1911, man, every time I come back to do a video on the 1911, I'm just impressed by it. It feels good. It feels so natural for me to shoot. I know it's antiquated. I know it's obsolescent, not specifically obsolete, but presenting this, firing it, drawing it, it just feels good and it's something that I love. And for whatever reason, I tend to shoot these really, really well. So it just feels like home for me. And it's not something specifically that I would always take out with me, but how it's been kind of defined and described is a Glock is gonna run for a really long time. However, the 1911 is like, you know, a muscle car, your tuned up sports car. It's gonna run better for a shorter amount of time, but when you need that speed, when you need that kind of race car performance is when these come into play. So there's gonna be different times when you possibly select one of these. Obviously at this point, not so much an option, but understand I'd be terrified of a man who trains super hard with his 1911, because no matter what, 230 grains from 45 ball just sucks. So guys, that brings us to the end of the MEUSOC, just a legendary 1911 served for a long time, not just during the global war on terror, but even before it. So if you can get your hands on one, highly recommend it. I know Alchemy does make a MEUSOC clone, as do a couple other manufacturers, but check them out. They feel really good as a combat accurized weapon. Man, it just really works. That brings us to the end. Thanks so much for watching, guys. That's all we got for you today. Of course, final thing that we have for you guys is going to be a little bit of dad advice. Dad advice for today is going to be, you know what? Read a book. When was the last time you read a book? It's a really good time. Good for your imagination, good for your brain. That's all we got for you today.